So when you're getting ready to set up your column, these are the things you'll need. You'll need the column. You'll want to set the column into 2 clamps, like I've seen, like you can see here in the video. You will want to put them to the point where you can fit a small test tube underneath of it, and you can easily exchange that test tube for a different test tube, so set that height as you need. You'll want to get a small Erlenmeyer with silica. Today we're going to be using about 70-80 milliliters worth of silica. You'll want a little bit of sand, as well as an Erlenmeyer full of hexanes that we're going to use to help pack our column. Off to the right, you can see we've got an attachment hooked up to our nitrogen line. We're going to use that to help pack our column, and then we have a funnel to help with loading all of our stuff as well. To start loading our column, we're going to close the stopcock, make sure nothing comes out the bottom. Take our silica, again about 70-80 milliliters, along with our hexanes, and we're going to pour some of the hexanes into the silica to create a slurry. So you'll see that not all of it dissolves right away, but as you start to mix, you should see all of the sandy part of the silica should start to dissolve, and you will create what we call a silica gel or a silica slurry. Once it looks like all of your silica is dissolved and it is a slurry, we're going to slowly pour it into our column. We'll then take this full of, or what was our silica, and we will let it pack and start to slowly drain into our container. That was where our silica slurry was, and you should be able to start to see that our silica is packing, and we've got a little bit of our hexane solvent that is on top. As it's packing, you want to just gently tap on the side of the column. So this is to make sure that any air bubbles are not trapped inside of our silica column. Okay, once it looks like the silica has stopped going any further down, we're going to stop. Use the hexane that we've collected into our silica gel container, and we're going to transfer the rest. And then we will repeat that same process. This should pack much faster this time. If you wish to help speed this process up, that's what this nitrogen line is for. So it's going to hook up to what's labeled as the nitrogen. If we turn on a little bit, you don't need a whole lot of pressure. You should easily be able to use your thumb to block off the pressure. But what you can do is then add some of this nitrogen pressure to the top of the column, and this will help push the solvent down and pack the column much faster than if it was just through gravity. You will see that as you dry out the silica parts, it will stay as like a sand, and it will stick to lots of things. Okay, once your silica has stopped packing, we're going to go ahead and leave about 1 inch to 2 inches of our solvent, in this case hexanes, on the top. We're going to add just a little bit of sand, and so we're going to create a sand layer on top of our silica layer, so that way as we're adding things to the column, we don't disrupt the top of the silica. Again, the sand layer doesn't need to be very thick. A couple of centimeters is more than enough. We'll open up our stopcock and we'll use our pressure again to make sure our column has continued to be packed. Okay, so once we've got the sand layer in there, we're going to bring the solvent line just to the top of our silica column, and that's how we've packed our column. Okay, once we have our column prepped, we have the silica packed in here. We've got a small layer of sand at the top, as you can see here. That's protecting the top of our column. The next thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we have everything ready to go, so that as soon as we add the compound to the column, we have all the test tubes, we have all the solvent, we have everything we need to go, because as soon as we start the column, we don't want to walk away unless we absolutely have to. So here, you can see I've got my compound, I've got 0.2 grams massed out, so that's ready to add to our column. I've got my test tube rack, so I'll set that back up here to the back. And then I have some of my mobile phase already pre-mixed in a graduated cylinder. So I'll put this back here as well. Okay, what we're going to do, now that we've got all of our stuff ready to go, we're going to take our compound and we're going to dissolve this in 1 ml or less of our mobile phase. So I'm going to take some of my mobile phase that I have ready to go, and I'm going to use about 1 ml. I'm going to use that to dissolve as much of this compound, or my mixture, as I can. Don't worry if all of your compound doesn't dissolve. If you try to overload the column, your column turns out very poorly. So just dissolve as much as you can and we'll load whatever we get dissolved. And what if we don't? We won't worry about it for this case. But generally that means you should have used a larger column. Okay. So once I've got my compound dissolved in my solvent that I'm going to use, I'm going to use a pipette. In this case, I'm going to use a glass pipette, but feel free to use the plastic ones. And I'm going to pull it up into the pipette, and easily and without dissolving the top of the column, I'm going to add the compound to the top of the column. So again, the long glass pipettes are really helpful because you can get really close to the top of the column. It helps if you go in a circular motion and you touch the side of the column, because then it will stream down instead of dropping droplets into the head of your column. So if you can see, but I've got a small layer of solvent that has my compound dissolved. I'm then going to drain some of the solvent so that the solvent then comes into the sand layer, and I'm going to stop as soon as it does. The key part to running a column is to never let it run dry. So there should always be some amount of solvent that's on top of the column. In this case, since we're loading it, it's okay to get really close to the sand. So once it's stopped, we're going to add just a little bit more sand. So this is going to protect not only the rest of the column below it, but as well as to separate the compound we just added from extra solvent we are going to add on top of our compound, and then essentially run the rest of the column. Okay, once I've gotten that, I'm then going to add my mobile phase. Again, add slowly so you don't disrupt the top of the column. Yes, the sand will help, but if you dump it in too vigorously, you'll really disrupt the top of your column. And then once you have a little bit of solvent on top of that last sand layer, you can add quite a bit. Okay. Then once you have your solvent, we're going to take this waste container, move it aside, and then we're going to take our test tube, and as soon as we open up our stopcock and we start running our column, we're going to start collecting our samples, or or our fractions as we call them. Again, the important thing is to always make sure that you have a solvent on top of your column. As it starts to get low, you can kind of see it's starting to come down. I'm going to come and add just a little bit more solvent. Once our test tube's starting to get full, we'll get our second test tube ready, and we'll do a quick exchange from one test tube to the next. This is about as full as you want to get a test tube. We'll put in the next one, and then that goes into our rack. We will let this go until we start to see both of our compounds come down. We will use TLC to see what compounds are coming, as well as to use TLC to see what fractions are clean in terms of pure compound 1 or pure compound 2. Again, always make sure that you have solvent on top of your column, so continue to monitor that and add solvent as you need. And then we'll change out our test tube. And that's how to set up, pack, and start your column. Once you've collected all of your compound out of the column and we're ready to clean up, what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and we'll stop collecting into our test tubes, and we will grab our waste container. So in this case, I'm just going to use my original silica Erlenmeyer that I'd used to pack the column, but you can use whatever you have ready for waste. What we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and let all of the remaining solvent that's in the column drain into our waste container. Again, we can use our nitrogen pressure to help speed this up. So I'll give myself just a little bit of nitrogen out of the top, and then you give some slight pressure, and you can start to see we're draining the remaining of the solvent down into our waste container. It will take a little bit of time to drain the rest of the solvent, so continue to add pressure until it seems like most of the solvent has been charged away from the column. Once you think you've got most of the solvent out of the column, we're going to take this, we'll close the stopcock for now, remove the solvent. We're then going to grab a waste container. In this case, we're just going to use one of these white bins. We're going to invert the column and dump all of the sand and the silica and all the contents into this waste container, and then we'll take care of this waste later in the lab. So what we'll do is we'll undo both of these clamps, pull this up, and then just simply invert, and you should get some of the silica to come out. If you're having a hard time getting the rest of the silica to come out, we're going to go ahead and open up the stopcock. We're going to remove the adapter from our nitrogen hose. And we're then going to gently connect the nitrogen to the top of our column. When you're holding the column like this, make sure you're supporting the stopcock up here. If you hold down here and you bang it around, you're likely to break this piece off. So hold up here, and then you should be able to gently tap on the side, and you should start to see silica start to come out. Continue to add nitrogen pressure until you don't see any more silica stuck to the side of the column. So once you got all the silica out, we'll take off the nitrogen. We'll then take the column over to the waste hood. We'll rinse it out a couple times with acetone to make sure that we don't leave any secrets for the next person that's used the column. And then we'll come back and we will make sure that we leave the column inverted wherever we found them. And that's how we clean our columns.